everyone. So we're going to take those notes you made in Unit 2 and create what I like to call a sound map. It isn't, to be honest, exactly a map, it's more of a table, but I decided to call it this to make it feel different from the notes and more memorable for you. Also, the word map just has a lot more whimsy compared to table, so there's that. We'll do this through 3 games with different amounts of complexity to their game score, so you can see how the maps would vary based on that, including Brave Fencer Musashi for the PS1, Super Mario Bros. 2 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for Nintendo Switch. The sound map compared to the game notes really visually links the sounds to the events in the gameplay. It is a higher level organization of your notes. And by higher level, I don't mean to give it like a value judgment, any sort of comment on how sophisticated these notes are. I just mean that it gives the person reading it a broader understanding of how these elements like gameplay, music, other audio, structure, function, interact to impact the player's experience of the game as a whole. So it might mean that some details are added, some details might be left out, language describing these details might be refined a bit, and otherwise edited to show the reader observing yourself, what you want them to see. In contrast, game notes are usually more detailed, they're more comprehensive, and you're just trying to describe everything that you can. Let's see how to get started. So the first step is to always take game notes, create a thick description of the gameplay. And this is basically what you made in Unit 2. Let's just take a minute to review some expectations, reminders. You're gonna want to keep your description simple, use terms you know. With those terms, be as detailed as possible. You'll always use time points. Please don't use AI, mostly for the reasons above. It really can't accomplish using time points or keeping descriptions in line with what we do in this class all that well. And keep your notes organized, name your files well, name them clearly. You're gonna wanna make sure the video had no commentary. You want a short span of time, and you're gonna wanna watch your video segment at least 3, maybe even 4 or 5 times, focusing on different things. I recommend that you always dedicate your first watch to discussing gameplay, and then your second, maybe third watch to discussing the sound, applying terms to describe that sound, and then your fourth and fifth watches to discuss structure and function. You can handwrite notes if you want. I do, but usually my handwriting's messy, so I'll type them out after. And sometimes using screenshots can be useful. I increasingly started doing this in my own work. And if you want to view your selected video together, that is awesome, and I'm happy to do that. My office hours are open to you to do that sort of important work. So let's look at some game notes together. These are the game notes from Brave Fencer Musashi. As you can see, I use a ton of time points. 5:14:26, 5:14:37. This is just hour, minute, second. Information in the top, the game title, game platform, the video link, the span that I am listening to. And I clearly have focused on different things for each round of listening. So the first one is gameplay, sound, structure, and function. These are my game notes for Super Mario, which look different. I think your game notes can look however works for you, as long as you include important information like the video link and what exactly you're listening to. Use time points. As long as it's clear, that's fine. So for these game notes, I used a table. We still have the time points. We still have a pretty detailed description, and the screenshots, I feel, make a big difference in illustrating what we're talking about. So for example, Luigi is throwing a turnip here. So we talk about the sound. You can also refer to the video, but this is a nice intermediate step. Here are my handwritten notes. Yes, my handwriting is very messy. And here are my notes for Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. Same idea, table with screenshots. It's a little more detailed than Mario Bros. 2, and I started becoming a little more narrative in my descriptions, but this is still based on multiple listens. And again, here are my paper notes. So these tabled notes are already a refined version of what I did here. So go ahead and pause this video, take a second to check out your game notes, make sure that they have what we just talked about, time points, especially specific descriptions of gameplay, music and audio, any comments on structure and function, a link to your gameplay video. If your game notes don't seem to have that, please go back and revise them a bit before you continue. And when you're ready, we'll start working on the sound map. So for the sound map, we're going to use this template. I'll provide downloadable versions of this in Google Drive or Microsoft Word or whatever you use so that you can work directly with it. It contains identifying information, including the game title, the console or platform it's on, keeping in mind that some games like the Final Fantasy series games release on multiple platforms and the sound differs depending on the platform. So noting the platform is important. We include a link to gameplay, and importantly, we include a link to your game notes. So please link the game notes. You can use Google Drive, you can use Microsoft OneDrive, whatever is convenient for you. This way I can see what you're basing your sound map on. And then you'll note the time range in the table below. Again, don't exceed 2 minutes because you're going to want to get as detailed as you can with those 2 minutes. So then we have a table. The table has 4 columns. We have on the leftmost column hour, minute, second. You can use minute, second if you're not going into the hour mark. We have a discussion of the gameplay. So what sort of things do you see? What's the player doing? Where is the player? What sort of actions happening? You'll describe the sound. So this is where you describe any music happening, any changes in music. You discuss any game audio, and you apply terms for sound, pitch, dynamic, duration, timbre, melody, harmony that we discussed in earlier music units to describe that. Then in the rightmost column, you'll discuss things like structure, function, other pertinent details. You'll see in my example notes that this really does vary depending on the game and what I feel like talking about. But usually structure and function are included. These guidelines are here for your convenience. Once you're ready to submit, please delete it. So on to our sample sound maps. So here's the sound map for Brave Fencer Musashi. As you can see, we have the game, console, PS1, the video link, a link to the game notes, and the time range. So all that stuff's filled out. And just looking at the first row, I'll give you a chance to check out the rest of it yourself. We have time point, 5 hours, 14 minutes, 26 seconds. Gameplay, Musashi's running around in the forest. There's pipes emitting steam. The music has long duration chords. There's steam sound from leaking pipes. He takes damage, so there's an oof sound. And then some broader notes and remarks. This is where I discuss things like function. The steam is quite loud in a way that seems meant to disrupt or otherwise. This is also function. So these are just 2 comments on function. So this is an example of how you would fill out the different areas. Sometimes cells will be blank or there won't be a change. So you can either say no change or just leave it blank. That's fine. Here's another blank cell here. I thought it would be important to discuss the menu sound. And there's also an important part of gameplay happening, but nothing interesting happens with regard to structure or function at this moment. So we just leave it blank. And it's okay for this column to have lots of blanks if there's nothing to discuss. Don't feel pressured to describe everything all the time if there's nothing happening. So here's a comment on how the music interacts with the gameplay. It, in this case, is just happening based on the area. None of the player actions seem to change the music in any way. So that's the sound map for Brave Fencer Musashi. The next sound map is for Super Mario Bros. 2. This is an earlier, older game for the NES, and it's a simpler game with a simpler soundtrack, but there's still interesting things to observe, so let's check that out. The level is displayed at 6 minutes 57 seconds, but there's silence, there's no sound at all, so you can just say silent, silence. And then the level begins. We describe gameplay, the descending melody introduces the level, and then a high-pitched melody with the bass line happens. There are lots of player sounds that are interesting to describe, so I just named them. I didn't get too much into describing them. If I revisited this table, I'd probably describe each of these sounds in a little bit more detail, but this is where I ended up for this video. There are some references to Mario Bros. 1, so I noted that when he enters subspace. The background music here is a maybe sleepier version of Super Mario Brothers 1. The same sort of thing happens with the star theme. So if I were to add, I'd probably add another comment in this column. It's okay for things to repeat. So this is a little simpler, this table, compared to Musashi, just because there's less detail happening. The hardware restricted what kind of sounds could be played. And a lot of the time with these player sounds, they had to happen instead of the background music. So that's why there's less to describe, because there is less to describe. So for the next game, Zelda Breath of the Wild, this is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to complexity of game score. This score is very amorphous, kind of aimless. In the gameplay, you're traversing this big open world. You've woke up with no memory of who you are or where you are, and you have no instructions regarding how to proceed. This game was actually maybe not novel, but very well known for that sense of aimlessness. And the music really matches this aimless style of gameplay, in that all of the melodies you encounter, especially in the Hyrule Field area, are very fragmented, and they slowly unfold as the situation transpires in a way that I think is really beautiful. So in the excerpt that I discussed in this sound map, he literally just woke up, he's walking down a hill, he destroys a couple bokoblins, and I discuss how the music develops as he fights these enemies, and he also hears Zelda's voice. Again, at this point in the game, you might not know who that is if you haven't played these before, but it's Zelda. So I discuss how her voice is very reverberant in timbre, how that adds to the sense of mystery regarding where she is. There's lots of interesting user interface sounds, which are just sounds that Link can't hear, but you can hear as the player controlling the game. And I also have some questions that I'm not, sure what the answer is. For example, some UI sounds seem to have no music behind them, but I'm not clear on if the music stopped to bring importance to them or if it was just a coincidence. I think it's okay in music to not be 100% sure about how something is made or why it's made that way. I think that adds to how interesting it is. And I think you gain from exploring it even if you don't come up with the answer. So feel free to include questions as well as your maybe very best effort at describing it as you work on this. You'll probably also notice I discuss user interface sounds a lot and start to kind of glancingly discuss game design. I think in the case of Breath of the Wild, the sound is very integral to the game design, so that's okay. My focus is still on the music, and your focus should also still be on the music. So that's it. I encourage you to check out these sound maps in more detail on your own and compare them to the game notes I provided and your own work. These sound maps don't have to be a huge deal. They don't have to be perfect. They can have questions, they can note ambiguities, or they can connect to other games in a series or other versions of a game if you like. They're really just a tool for organizing your thoughts that you build on over time. Ideally, you're revisiting these as you spend more time with a game or as you develop your vocabulary for discussing game sound or sound in general. And with my own sound maps, I'm sure if I were to listen more and spend more time, I'd add more to them. I think that's the case for most things, and it's okay. You can take a deep dive if you're feeling motivated to, but it's okay to take a first look. It's a little more detailed than if you're just chilling and watching a video and have it be that. I often use these maps personally as a springboard for future analysis and sometimes transcription. I often find things that are interesting and worth exploring further when I'm creating them. As we proceed through the course, you'll have more terms to describe relationships between sound and gameplay that you might apply to these maps, like diegetic and adaptive and interactive. So you can use those later to refine your maps if you have the time. So right now, find your game notes from a few weeks ago and try to organize them in a sound map using the template I've used. As you can see, I really don't add that much to them a lot of the time. It's really just a way to reorganize things, but they do show my personal long look at a particular game scene. And that's really what I want for you, is just to take a long and deep look at some of your favorite games. So I look forward to seeing your baby sound maps and hope that you enjoy the assignment. Bye.